Our first witness today will be Eugenie Small. Are you close enough to the mic?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you just go ahead and tell everyone your name?
My name's Eugenie Small.
What is your racial background?
West Indian.
Do you have any children?
I've got one son.
How old is he?
15.
Is he here today?
He isn't actually. No, he had homework.
Did you at one time work for Lambeth Council?
I did, yeah.
Do you now?
No.
When did you first start working for the council?
I started work for the council in about 1989, you know, over 10 years ago.
How did you start out in the council?
Well, I actually came as a selectist for all social services. I then went into the committee division, and then I transferred over to housing. And I worked in SHS, dealing with homeless cases, dealing with bed and breakfast.
At some point, did you begin working for a section called LCAS, or Community Alarms?
I did. I started working with Community Alarms in 1996.
And how long did you work there?
I worked there for 4 years. I worked from 1996 to December 2000. When in effect I was actually sacked from that community alarm. We went through a disciplinary process for an incident that happened in the section. One of the clients we work for emergency response. I don't know, you might not be aware of community alarms. We deal with elderly and disabled people, and one of the clients actually called in, had a problem with a wheelchair, and I was disciplined. I went through the disciplinary process for that.
To give the audience a bit of a background, what was it like for you working in community alarms?
Working in community alarms was very oppressive, very intimidating. Community alarms is not, it's isolated. There were times when I've actually gone into community alarms and my stomach has churned when I've seen the manager's cars in the car park, because there was a feeling that when they were on duty, you didn't know whether you were going to be targeted. You didn't know what would be left in your pigeonhole because you had perhaps raised something that they didn't agree with, and you would get a very terse memo back or something like that. It was very oppressive. And also we're isolated from the rest of the council, and we work shifts, and it was very difficult there.
What kind of things might you be targeted for?
Just speaking out, just disagreeing with the managers, raising issues that you thought should be looked at, perhaps supporting another colleague that you'd seen something happen to them. Lots of incidences. You could, if we spoke out, we would often say to each other, particularly the black workers, we would say, be careful, you know now that you're going to be targeted, and you know, things would kind of be happening to you.
Did you ever try to suggest improvements of the service?
I did. I and fellow colleagues have gone out to other control centres, and we went to look at their practices to see how we could improve the section. We brought back some information, lots of information, valuable information I thought, and certainly my other colleagues thought so, and some of these were never implemented. They kind of basically very much the feeling that who are you to tell us how to do our job? It was that kind of feeling.
Did you immediately conclude that the problems you were facing could be identified as racism?
I didn't in the beginning, I must admit, I didn't. I'd gone into a section, I knew there were lots of problems in the section. There had been, when I first went into the section, and actually a black manager had at that point been suspended by one of the white managers, and she herself had gone through the disciplinary process. So I'd gone into this section, there were lots of problems in it, and I didn't immediately connect, though I've been hearing lots of different things about, you know, the management, one particular manager in particular, white manager in particular. Over the years, you begin to realise that, you know, the problems that were in that section were happening to black workers.
Now, you had particular problems with a certain white manager, and at first you didn't conclude that that was about racism, correct?
No.
How did you come to the understanding that it really wasn't a personality conflict between the two of you, but that it was an issue of racism?
Over the years, initially I went in there, and I'll just relate something that happened. I went in there 3 weeks into the job. They asked me to go on the rota, and we were lone workers, and we go out at all times during the day, during the night, and we have to deal with our clients. And they said to me, I'll put you on the rota, and to start the night. And I said, well, no, I don't believe that that's good practice to send me out on my first shift as a night worker. I think I need to see some more emergencies. And I said this. Then this particular white manager, she came in, she said, oh, I hear you have a problem with doing nights. So I said, no, the issue's not nights. It's about actually that I hadn't seen enough emergencies. And she said, well, maybe you need to think about changing your job, and you need to toughen up. We went on from there. There was another incident where I'd actually gone to collect my son, came back because there was an emergency. I brought my son back. He wasn't in the control centre. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and the manager turns up, and she says to me, can I have a word with you? I said, okay. And she doesn't ask me for an explanation of why my son is there. Nothing at all. She said, have you got a childcare problem? Are you a single parent? Are you? Now, I've never been questioned about my marital status, so I had to wonder, why would this woman be asking me about my marital status? It went on from there. I then began to learn that she had made these kind of comments before, and her comments and her opinions was that West Indian women are all single parents. They live off benefits. Having been in the workforce where there are plenty of black women who are coming in and struggling every day with their childcare problems and everything else, I find that hard, you know, to understand why that manager would hold those opinions. And gradually, as the time has gone on, more and more incidents were happening, and I began to believe, you know, this was racism, certainly in the way she treated me.
What other types of behavior on her part, in terms of how she related to you, made you feel that it was definitely racism?
I would come into work. She would do things like, she would look me up and down. She would, if I opened the door, if she came into the office, she would not say hello to me. She would perhaps go and speak to my colleague in another room. We're only ever 2 of us on shift who happen to be white. She would say hello to her. The mannerism, the tone. I think sometimes it's very hard to describe to a white person what racism is. And they often say, when I'm talking, I've been through this process where I've spoken to unison officials and everything else, and they say to me, did you hear her make verbal comments? Did you hear her make racist comments towards you? And I say, no, but there doesn't have to be. You can feel racism emanating from somebody. Attitude, mannerism, tone, patronising, it's all of these things. We feel racism and we know it.
Now, you hadn't ever heard any statements directly, but you'd heard she'd had these opinions about West Indian women living off the government. In terms of how this white manager thought of you, did your suspicions about her specific racist attitude toward you later get confirmed?
It did. I mean, as I said before, one of the things was that she would kind of always look me up and down, and if I say she was always cutting her eye, I'm sure that you understand what I'm saying. And I certainly felt, I used to feel when she came into the room, she would stand there, she would stand behind me, as if she was waiting for something for me to do wrong. I just felt that all the time. Later on, once I'd gone through the disciplinary process and people were willing to speak out, which they were not willing to do before, I've heard that she's made comments about my hair. Well, I make no apologies for my hair. My hair is natural. I'm a black woman. Exactly. She has said, I've heard, she has said I'm too black. Well, I'm sorry. I'm a black woman. That's what I am, and I'm very proud to be. You know, that's what I am. So I'm not going to apologise for the fact that I'm a black woman. I'm proud, and I'm not going to be what she wants me to be, the stereotype of a black woman, which I don't quite know what that is.
Now, in all of your years working for Lambeth Council before this particular incident that you alluded to earlier, had you ever been disciplined for anything?
No, nothing, ever. Not in the 7 years that well, it's 10 years, isn't it? No, I've never been disciplined for anything, never.
Why do you think you were hauled before a disciplinary panel on that particular incident?
I would say it had to be my blackness. Having been in LCAS, and I know that incidences have happened with white workers, and I know that they have been treated very differently to the incidents that happened with myself and my colleague, who also happened to be black. And I certainly have no doubt that had I been white, I would not have gone through a disciplinary process.
When this happened to you, you decided to do something about it.
I did. Initially, I actually, when this was happening to me, I actually wrote some letters, and I wrote letters to the Director of Housing, because between my disciplinary and myself and my colleague, there were other things going on. There was an Asian worker who came into the section at that point. His treatment by a white line manager was so appalling, we actually had to write to the Director of Housing about that. Nothing was done. He actually said, would you like a facilitator to come in? And we said, this has gone beyond a facilitator. Too much is happening in this section. This manager has been in the section for 6 years, and in that time, 4 black people have been disciplined. Well, that's one nearly every 18 months. You know, there is something going on there.
Who acted as your shop steward?
Alex Owolade did. And I can honestly say, up until that point, before Alex came on board, nobody wanted to know. Nobody was interested in what we were going through. And I had gone to senior management, and I'd actually said to them, because we, at that point, were told she was going through the complaints procedure. When I asked her for a copy of the complaints procedure, she said, I don't have one. And I said, how can you be going through the complaints procedure and you don't actually have a copy of it? And she said to me, well, you need to go up and pick one up from personnel. I've then gone to her manager and said, look, she's not sticking to what she should be sticking to. And she said, you cannot complain until she makes a decision. But once she's made that decision, you're actually sacked. So what do you do? So, yeah.
Now, your picture appeared on leaflets that Alex Owolade, as your union's steward, put out in your defense. Was that a big step for you to take?
It certainly was. I don't think anybody thinks that they want their pictures appeared all over leaflets. But in the end, I think that we felt enough was enough. We had seen so much go on in that section. We had seen so much harassment of staff that we really thought, you know, the time has come for us to speak out. This was not just about myself and my colleague. It was about another black worker who maybe 2 years before had gone through the same process. It was about the Asian worker who 6 months before that had gone through the same process. It kept just going on, and people's lives were being affected by this woman, and nobody was willing to actually say, you know, come on, we have to make a stop. So yeah, we did that leaflet because we wanted people to understand what was going on in LCAS.
And did you and your colleague, who was also being targeted by this manager, write the first leaflet together?
Yes, we did. We did. And everything in that leaflet that we wrote was absolutely true.
I want to get to some of the things that were written in the leaflet now. It mentions bullying and harassment. Why did you mention bullying and harassment?
Because the managers would intimidate the workers. It's difficult to be able to say that they built a climate of fear in LCAS, and people would not speak out, and they would make the comments to workers like, oh, if you speak out about this, your job will be on the line, and people were very, very fearful about speaking out and saying, this is what's going on, you know, so.
Did you ever raise issues of bullying and harassment with senior management?
Yeah, certainly did. I mean, in 1999, investigation was carried out in LCAS, all right? Bullying, harassment, all of this was mentioned, racism was mentioned as well. The manager, senior management, conducted this investigation. It took a year to complete, and at the end of that, the report bore no reflection that we actually received, bore no reflection to what had been said in those interviews. And I actually got on the phone to her and I said the report that we were given completely exonerated the manager. There was no mention of what had gone on. And I said that this report exonerates the managers and just implicates the staff. And she said that what had gone on in LCAS had been too subtle to define. Bullying, racism and harassment is not subtle. It wasn't until I went to another IT, again in this section, again about racism, that I actually became aware that there was an original report. To date, we have not seen this report because the managers were allowed to see the report first. And I heard through the grapevine, whether that's true or not, they said to the senior management, who happens to be black, if you don't kind of suppress it, we are going to take a grievance out on you. And so that report has never come to light. And I think that because of that, things were allowed to escalate in LCAS, and they felt very much, particularly this white manager, that she could do as she wanted. Now, in your view, is what occurred with that report something you would describe as a cover-up? Yes, certainly. Certainly. We've never seen that report to this day, and we are still waiting for it. And at every avenue, we have asked to see that report, and we have never been able to.
Now, this report that was conducted by a senior manager, what was the race of that manager?
She was black. She was black.
Did you at one time think that it would help black workers, for black managers to be in more positions of power?
I did. I mean, when I first came into Lambeth, it was probably the first time I'd ever worked with black people in numbers, and it was the first time I'd ever seen tax managers, and I certainly did used to think, oh my God, you know, this is great. I don't think that black people asked for any particular favours from managers. They just wanted to be treated in the same way. But it's good to see them there. But in my 10 years of working with Lambeth, I must say that my experience has shown that black managers can be more punitive in the way that they deal with their black staff. And I think that that has something to do with maybe they feel insecure. They may be in a management position, but at the end of the day, the hierarchy is still white. And I think they fear to actually speak out and say, this is what is going on. You know, I really believe that that's my experience of having worked in Lambeth for 10 years.
Going back to the leaflet, you mentioned in the first leaflet that the discipline was malicious and vindictive. Is that your unequivocal belief?
Yes, to this day. To to this day. I base that on her attitude to me. I base that on the fact that I've been willing to speak out and say some of this practice in here, in this section, you know, they border on harassment of people. You know, when they've done things to me, I've been willing to write, and I've been willing to write to say to senior managers, this is what is happening here. And I certainly believe when I spoke out, we wrote about the treatment of the Asian worker who had gone in, all this was happening at the time I was going through the disciplinary process as well.
And did you feel for a time that your job was at stake before you were taken up on disciplinary charges?
Certainly. In the 4 years that I've worked in LCAP, I felt very much that I had to watch my back. Everything that I did, I had to watch my back. And the feeling was very much that this particular manager was waiting for me to put a foot wrong. And I'd often be sitting in the control centre and she would just come in and be staring at me. And, you know, at one point I've had to ask her, what are you know, are you waiting for something? You know, what are you waiting for? Certainly I felt her.
Because she would stand there and just stare
at me for no particular reason. You know, pick me up on points that I've seen white workers do that she has never commented on. And I tried in the years to do any job that I've done to the best of my ability. You know.
Coming to the discipline itself, how were you treated during the course of that discipline brought against you?
First of all, I said she started off, she said that she was following a complaint procedure. Throughout the process, we were never spoken to informally. Everything became formal very quickly. And I remember going to her at one point and saying, you could have come and spoken to me informally. At the end of the day, I'm a human being. You see me every day. And she said, I don't see you every day. This is not just about what's going to happen to you, but it's about the implications for the centre. And I had no doubt at that point that I was going to go through a disciplinary process. In between that, we had memos of her instructing us to do this. Nothing was ever, she never came and spoke to us informally at any point.
Did you feel that the disciplinary process was an equal one?
No, it certainly wasn't. I don't know if anyone in here has ever gone through the disciplinary process in Lambeth. You feel so disempowered. I went into what was described as a disciplinary hearing, and she put some information in front of me and started to read it, and I began to query it. I said, well, sorry, this is not wrong. She said, this is not your time to speak. Your time will come later. You never have a chance to speak in the disciplinary process, never at all. It's all in the power of the managers. You have a shop steward sitting beside you, not Alex, wasn't Alex at that point, and they're told in the hearing that they cannot speak. The only thing they can ask for is an adjournment. So you're in this totally powerless position. If you go and you complain, there is no one to complain to, in fact, once you start going through the disciplinary process. There is nothing that you can do.
Now, you had to fight with those leaflets even to get a hearing.
Okay, because I was actually sacked without a hearing the first time round. I was allowed to work, and the incident, a lady was stuck in a wheelchair, and this incident happened in April of that year. I was allowed to continue to work until November the 7th. I came into work, and I'd in fact been on sick leave because it was so stressful coming into that environment, so stressful, and continuously feeling all the time that not only was I going through the disciplinary process, but she was still there waiting for something else maybe to come up. And on the 7th of November, we got a phone call that we should go to the Unison office. When I went to the Unison office, I was told we had been suspended They had had the hearing the week before, and I'd actually been off sick. They'd had the hearing in our absence. We were told on the 7th that we were going to be suspended. We went over to Hanbrook House and we were told, no, you're not going to be suspended, you are going to be sacked. And we were actually, and Alex, at that point, Alex fought. He fought for us to actually get a hearing. I can't tell you what it was like to have Alex to come on board for myself and my colleague. I mean, at that time, we just kind of felt so deflated. And I remember the day that I was told that I was sacked, and I went over to the Unison office, and dare I mention the name, John said to me that you need to sort out your direct debits and things like that. And Alex said, no, I'm sorry, we are not going to have that. We are going to fight to get you a hearing. No. So, you know, and that was what happened. He campaigned for us to get a hearing. He wrote these leaflets. Everything in these leaflets are true. Everything that's said about those managers is true. There is not one thing in here that is not true. And he fought for us, and we actually got a hearing. At the end of the day, we were still sacked. And can I say, when I walked into that disciplinary hearing, the first thing that I noticed was my manager was the only white manager in there. The only white person in that room. And I sat there and I thought, my God, racism has been mentioned here, and I know the reasons for having 2 black panel members. They will say, well, if you're sacked, how could those 2 panel managers have been racist? No, they sacked you on the evidence. We know, we are not stupid.
Well, what was the eventual fight, the eventual outcome of your fight for reinstatement?
All right. Eventually, we did get reinstated, and it was a long, hard fight. A very long, hard fight. It was incredibly stressful, one of the most stressful things, especially, you know, for myself, my colleague, and, you know, during that process, I must have spoken to Alex 10 times a day, because he was just fantastic. At the end of the day, we did get an appeal hearing eventually, and we did get reinstated.
Is reinstatement at an appeal hearing a common outcome for a worker?
No, it certainly isn't. I don't think it's ever been, no, something that's been done before, but it was very unusual to be reinstated in Lambeth. I was told actually my colleague and myself were in a position where we'd been sacked twice, and that had been quite unheard of in Lambeth, so, you know.
And we understand that it was in fact the first time in 6 years that a worker was ever reinstated at an appeal hearing. The first in 24 appeals. Did you end up going back to work for Lambeth Council?
No, I didn't. I mean, I was lucky that I had another job, but to have gone back into Lambeth would have been, I don't know how I would cope with it. I mean, my colleague actually went back, and eventually she left. And I think that she found that period of going back to work too stressful. We were going back to be under the same management structure that had actually said that we should be sacked. We were going back under the same management structure that had allowed the white manager in my section to behave in the way that she had been allowed to behave. Nobody seemed to be. Managers in Lambeth, particularly white managers, I seem to feel, have no accountability. There doesn't seem to be any accountability. They can do what they want. And I know, having gone through this process, and I don't know for workers who've been in Lambeth, and I know that anyone who's worked in MFJ, and they saw the leaflet that went out from Unison, where they said, we categorically state this manager is not racist. And I know that I had black workers ringing me up and saying to me, my God, how could they have done this to us? They're treating black workers like they're nothing. When we can give them information and say, yes, this woman has done this, yes, this woman has done that. They said to me, did she make verbal remarks to me? I say no. People come forward and say that I can vouch that, yes, she did make these remarks. And yet, a union pays out money to a woman for a defamation claim. That's for us as black workers saying, you know, what are we then in this workforce? We mean nothing to this workforce.
In a way, they only want you to be a place, but I have no place.
Right.
That's right.
How we going to change that?
We're going to change it right here. We're going to change it right here. Are you proud that you made that fight?
I am, incredibly. And as I said before, it's been a hard fight. It's been a stressful fight. But at the end of the day, it highlighted what was going on in LCAS. It has highlighted what goes on in the council. It has brought us to the point. And we've got people here sitting in this room who would never have been here if it hadn't been the start that has been this leaflet. So yes, I'm incredibly proud of that.
Now you're aware that Alex Owolade was dismissed as a result of circulating those leaflets in your defense. What do you think of that?
I think it's an atrocity. I feel, you know, as a black worker, he's standing out and he's saying, this is what happens, this is what happens in Lambeth, this is what happens when you actually highlight racism, this is what happens. And he has been sacked for actually having a voice and pointing out these things. And it's by sacking him, it's saying to black people, you should know your place. We shouldn't be able to speak out of place.
Son, are you worried for his safety because of racism?
I am, and I think as any black parent, for me it's twofold. I worry about racist attacks, I worry about stop and search, because that is a reality for black people, it's a reality for black youngsters. And I know quite recently my son said to me, my son is 15, and he said to me, oh mum, you know, this is the time I'll start being stopped and searched, because you know, that is a real, when you hear that coming from the mouth of your own child, that's, you know, you kind of think and sit there and you think, my God, and I know that is a fear that I have as a mother. I know that, and I'm sure other black women, other black parents have that fear too.
Back to the incident that was used as a pretext to dismiss it. You mentioned that the person had been stuck in a wheelchair. Did you, as an emergency response worker, receive such phone calls all the time?
I have in my having worked in LCAS for a number of years, I have received people coming in and saying that they're stuck in wheelchairs. I know we have a logbook and we log all our calls, we log all incidences. We would put in there, you know, this person has called in to say their wheelchair is stuck. And I've been told by my manager that is not a service we provide, and that would not be something that we as response workers would go out to. We are an emergency service. I know that decision that we made was based on previous experiences that I've had in that service, and no one has ever come to me and said, we go out and deal with wheelchairs. It has never been said.
And the reasons given were that you were not staffed well enough for that?
Well, yeah, because you have to remember, as emergency response officers, there are only 2 officers on, and we cover the whole of Lambeth. We go down to Waterloo, up to Streatham Fell, almost into Norbury. If one officer goes out, one officer has to remain to answer the call. So if you're in a section and an officer has an emergency and somebody's on the floor and they're in Waterloo and that person happens to be in Streatham, they have to drive from Waterloo all the way to Streatham to deal with that call.
It was expected of you that you should apologize at the disciplinary hearing. Did you apologize?
I didn't apologise because I felt very much at that time that the whole process had gone past issuing an apology. I felt very much that if my manager had wanted me to issue an apology to that client, that she would have come to me right in the beginning and asked me to do so. And I felt very much that the way I had been treated in the disciplinary process was about disempowering me, was about making me defer to her. And I certainly felt that over the years that because I didn't defer, that was viewed as I was stepping out of line. So for me to have issued an apology at that point would have said to me, this is being deferential, and she had put me in a position where she had been able to somehow take away whatever sense of empowerment that I might have had.
Why did you decide to come here and testify today?
For me, I think I wanted to talk about institutional racism. I wanted to support Alex as well, because Alex has done so much for me, for my colleagues, for other members in LCAS who have had to struggle to get some kind of recognition. And I think very much it's about trying to empower black workers who do struggle every day. And every day is a struggle coming into work or working in Lambeth's environment. I know because I've been there.
And have you reached a point in your life where you've drawn a line?
Not quite. I still need to fight on.
What does justice mean to you in this situation?
Okay. I think that justice, first and foremost, would be about getting Alex reinstated. I think justice is about recognising that institutional racism does exist. It does exist in Lambeth. Black workers deal with racism every day, and I think that needs to be recognised.